Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roasts number 21. You will notice that today I'm joined by Malvika. Malvika is our Chief Content Officer here at Sandweeks Consulting. And today, Malvika is going to be asking me about the profiles that we find on Reddit. And I'm going to be doing most of the roasting. So we have quite an interesting set of profiles, as usual. We have an architect who's looking to transition to private equity or development. We'll talk about that. We have a biochemist who's self-conscious that he doesn't have a PhD. Going to squash that. We have a career landlord who's looking to formalize that experience. And we have a few applicants who are targeting quite specific schools and want to know whether they have a chance. And we're going to put them out of their misery and give them a conclusive answer one way or another. So, Mal, let me share my screen. Can you confirm you can see my screen fine?
Yes, I can.
Hey, awesome stuff. Let's dive into the first profile, shall we?
Yes, let's do that. So first we've got the an architect from Hong Kong.
Okay.
This is a non-traditional profile. They are targeting INSEAD, LBS, Oxford, Cambridge, and Hong Kong University. So a lot of European universities there. The background is they're 28, male, East Asian, the undergrad in architecture, perfect GPA, that's 4.0. Same for their master's in architecture, 4.0 GPA with distinction and design competition awards, a postgrad diploma as well to become a registered architect. As for their work, they've worked in London for an NY-based, globally prominent architecture firm. Multiple involvement in concept design, planning submission, sustainability initiatives, coordination and reporting to the client, and also involved in recruiting at their practice. As for the extracurriculars, they are the Urban Land Institute mentorship group leader. They've also published a peer-reviewed article about the built environment in Hong Kong, and they mentored high school students applying for architecture. Now, their why for the MBA is that the Chinese architecture industry is slow at the moment, and they want to return to Hong Kong for family reasons. And the slowed property industry is also affecting their promotions. So they do want to get an associate promotion before making their MBA applications, but they want to pivot into a development role to sort of broaden their perspective of the built environment. And later on, the long-term goal is to lead acquisitions of distressed commercial properties in Hong Kong and redevelop these to be mixed-use spaces for people to enjoy, which is a very interesting long-term goal. So, Sam, what do you think of this profile?
Okay. Let's do a high-level sort of profile evaluation, quick and dirty profile evaluation for what I see. And also, obviously, we upvote. The first thing is the academics. Obviously, a 4.0 GPA is fantastic. The first class, what's happening there is, I think, OP being at UCL, which is a UK school, has self-converted the first class degree into a 4.0 GPA, which is fair. But because it's a first class, the American schools in particular, in fact, most schools, won't take that GPA and put it into their averages, which means this 4.0 carries a little bit less weight, but it's still awesome. I'm focusing entirely on the undergrad GPA because the master's GPA doesn't carry anywhere near as much weight. So that's on the academic side. On the professional side, look, architecture is a really unusual MBA industry. There are really not that many. I worked with an architect the year before last, who got into INSEAD, LBS, Oxford, and Cambridge. So we know that they like architects. We know for a fact that it's something that they will look positively at because there simply aren't that many and they want a diverse cohort. I would say from a professional perspective, that promotion that you mentioned would be really nice. If that promotion can come through in time, that would be a real benefit. I would also say, just from an extracurricular perspective, this Urban Land Institute mentorship group leader, I really like that. I think that's going to carry all of the extracurricular weight. Not so impressed by peer review articles. MBA programs don't really care about that very much. But they're mentoring high school students. That's also quite useful. But I would really focus on that mentorship group leader, which is like formal leadership experience in an extracurricular setting. That's beautiful. Schools are going to love that. From a demographic perspective, look, 28-year-old East Asian Chinese basically is what I'm reading from this. Hong Kong, perhaps slight differentiator, but still definitely considered overrepresented in MBA land. Goals. These goals that you talk about, particularly, I'm a bit worried about the real estate private equity pivot. As I've talked about at length in Reddit Roasts, it's quite a nepotistic industry. And unless you have a way in, business schools are going to be a little bit wary about their chances of placing you into real estate private equity. It's not like banking or consulting where the industry sends people to the campus to recruit and there's a pipeline and they recruit a few people every year. Private equity is not like that. It's too small. So there's a little bit of a concern there. I would be, and we'll talk about this, I'll be a lot more focused on that development role. I think that's a lot more likely to work for OP. So the conclusion then on the profile, Mal, is solid, not exceptional, but really, really solid. And so, yeah, let's go from there.
So what the applicant really wants to know, so they're going for a 26, 27 intake.
Okay.
So they want to, they haven't done their GMAT yet. And it's late they think it's late for an R2 entry. So they want to know how feasible their chances are for next year or the year after.
Okay. Good. So I think the focus is around years of work experience. So the average years of work experience on these MBA programs is about 5.5 or so years, a little bit higher than the US averages. So if OP, I think in terms of years of work experience, it's not clear, but as long as OP is around 5-ish years of work experience at matriculation, then I think a 26 or 27 intake is absolutely fine. If the difference is that promotion, I'd say I'd be tempted to wait. If the promotion cut is going to come through, and that's the difference between 2026 and 27, by all means, wait. Now, let's talk about specifically the GMAT score required for these schools. The number, Mal, that I had in mind was about a 665. So in line, maybe a little bit below the averages of these schools, but certainly in the ballpark. OP hasn't got a profile that he could get away with a really, really low GMAT score, particularly because of that Chinese background. It's a competitive pool, but also at the same time doesn't need to be smashing the lights out on the GMAT like an overrepresented candidate might have to. So I say 665 is kind of my finger in the air number for those schools. The advice I would give OP on this specifically is that as an architect, focus on the impact of your projects, right? You can get very nerdy in architecture if you're not careful, and they get very kind of obsessed over the names of architects they've worked with and stuff. And frankly, people outside of your industry don't care. They don't give a shit about that stuff. Focus on the impact that you're having on people. So for example, I was involved in redeveloping a tunnel that now 28 million people a year drive through, right? The impact of your work then is clear on people. The other thing to do is if you can name drop flagship projects that you've been involved with, like a famous tower that's been thrown up in London, for example, that people know the name of, that will add credibility to your profile because ordinary people have heard of that tower. So that would be my advice to really leverage this profile into a solid application. I think I've answered all the questions. Anything I've missed?
No, that makes sense. Also, OP does say that they feel like architects are left out of decision making a lot. And what they want from the pivot is to get greater exposure to this decision making. So currently what they really enjoy, so like you said, a lot of their job is really technical. So they do manage a lot of quantitative data. But they really like the part where they have to make those design decisions and present it to the clients and structure their pitches. So they want that to translate into how they can justify their long-term goals.
Sure. So regarding these goals, I think that the classic route for an architectural applications to MBA that I think OP should follow as well is moving from the sort of the slightly nerdy architecture side to the more commercial side, right? Whether that's valuing projects, whether that's budgeting, whether that's project management. Those are the skills that an MBA has that an architect doesn't necessarily have. So all of these goals that involve that I think are fair game, and OP should be, can focus on in his goals essays.
Okay, good. I think we've covered everything. Shall we move on to the next profile?
Let's move on to the next profile then.
Okay, so this is a biochemist without an PhD. So they are 34 male, white. Undergrad is 3.7 biochem in Canada, 3.9 postgrad in biochem at the same school in Canada. GMAT 760. Work experience, they've got 8 years of experience. They are currently a drug discovery scientist in Big Pharma. They've been doing that for 5 years. They've had 2 promotions in 3 years. But the problem is that they'll cap out here without a PhD. So they can't see a way forward without an advanced degree. The extracurriculars, they've done hockey coaching for 10 years. And they also have published scientific papers with an emphasis on neurological disorders. Post MBA goals, consulting or BCPE side of biotech. They find the business strategy side to be quite fascinating. So that's where they want to go. Target schools, M7s, T50s. So what do you think of this profile overall?
Okay, so let's dive right in. Like from an academic perspective, obviously a 760 is really, really strong. No way around it. That's outstanding. The undergrad GPA, which is the one schools really care about, 3.7, is a little bit above the M7 average, but it's not, which of about 3.6, but it's not outstanding. It's the GMAT that's really doing the work there on the academic side. In terms of professional, look, drug discovery is cool. And I would frame, and if the applications, if the OP's narrative is focused on like, I discovered a drug that has saved X lives, that will come across clearly. But as I've talked about in the past, publishing papers in and of itself and the research side is kind of not really seen that as really sort of grounded or impactful on the ground. It's a bit more theoretical and fluffy, and that won't carry as much weight. In terms of 8 years of work experience, I think that's a real question mark. It also depends on if that's 8 years now or 8 years at matriculation. We are currently in July of 2025. September will be the application date for round 1 with a view to start in September the following year. So if it's 8 years now, it could easily be 9 or 10 years of work experience in matriculation. And that's like double the limit, double the average, of M7 schools. That's a big question mark for me. And I think possibly the main sort of concern that I have. Extracurriculars, I love this hockey coaching. That's really, really cool. I'm imagining like a leadership lesson that comes from that for a Harvard essay, for example, or a difficult decision for a Kellogg essay 2, for example. Could be nice. Demographic, okay, white male, overrepresented, no way around that. Goals. These, I'm not in love with these goals, right? Consulting sounds a little bit lazy. It might be possible that, especially if you can focus on the biotech angle, that it might be possible to make that a bit interesting and a bit unique. But if it's just consulting and just healthcare consulting generally, there are so many healthcare applicants that are saying that I'm a little bit worried that you might just, not stand out in that pool. And then biotech, VC, and PE, same as I've said before, those are companies that don't have pipelines for recruiting MBA programs. They tend to be recruiting within a little nepotistic network. I'm also worried about that. So I'm not in love with those goals. We'll talk about what might be better afterwards. The conclusion here is that I'm worried about the work experience. I'm worried about those goals, but the profile does have potential if we can overcome those issues. So let's go from there then. What specific questions does OP have?
So for OP, and they say this in the comments as well, like that is their same, like that's the main problem is our adcom is going to be turned off by my age. So why they want an MBA right now in their careers, because the R&D side of the job, it becomes a silo for people who lack a PhD. And in their words, they want to pivot before they have gray hair, and they can't pipette anymore. So in terms of just age, what is feasible? Which schools should they apply to as an older admit? And do they have a shot at T15 and M7 as somebody who's 34?
Okay. Look, first thing is I really wouldn't worry about that PhD from an MBA application perspective. It's really very uncommon for PhDs to apply to MBAs. So it's completely, that is in no way going to hold OP back from an application side. It's holding him back in his career, but not from an application side. So that's one thing. The other thing then is, look, because of this age issue, right? 34 years old, 8, maybe 9 years of work experience. There's going to be an element of luck here. If the school in question that OP is applying to happens to, for whatever reason, have a bunch of younger applicants this year, then they will be more open to having an older applicant to offset that and kind of reach the average of 5 or whatever years. But there are lots of over-age 34, 9-year work experience type applicants. How does OP stand out from them? And the question that comes up as a result is leadership experience, management experience. What schools get from bringing in applicants who have got 9 years of work experience is people who have led teams, people who have managed individuals. And I'm worried that OP, certainly in this review, in this profile evaluation request, hasn't talked at all about management experience in the work environment. If OP has got management experience in the work environment, he will be able to differentiate himself and stand out among the older applicants. If he doesn't, he's in for a hard time. So I would include M7s and T15s in the application set, but I would not throw everything at those. I would want to include some, sort of T20s in the mix as well. And the other angle that has to be considered is that the European schools tend to have slightly higher work experiences because they're shorter programs. They tend to be a little bit more receptive to older applicants. That might be worth considering. And in particular, if OP has any French, OP is Canadian. If OP has any French, there might be, INSEAD might stand out as being particularly attractive to his profile. Now I'm seeing West Coast Canada, which is not French, but there might be some French in high school, etc., that can help that. So that's my sort of prognosis of the schools. I think OP needs to just apply to a lot of schools to really give himself the best chance. I think that's my key conclusion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And focus on if they have any management experience at all at work, just focus on that in their narrative, make that strong. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Are we ready to move on to profile 3 then?
Let's do it. Very short one.
Very short one, and but very interesting. They're applying to Booth and Kellogg, and that's what they want to know what their chances are for this. They are 26. They're white male from Chicago. They went to UPenn for mechanical engineering. They have a 3.75 GPA. Now they've given both the GMAT and the GRE. So they don't ask this question, but we can certainly discuss which score that they can submit, what positions them as a stronger applicant. So they have a 331 GRE and a 645 GMAT focus. Work experience-wise, 4 years of experience, family business, engineering firm. They also, on the side, they're a realtor, investor, part-time. Extracurriculars, they're a landlord. They own 8 rental units in Chicago, 9% cap rate. Rec letters, they have one from the family business client and one from a real estate partner. Now, why MBA is they want to grow their family business, essentially return to family business. If that doesn't work, they'll get a management role at a larger firm. Alternatively, grow their local real estate portfolio and go into commercial. So let's recap what
how do I see it? Okay, academic. And I like this, very, very clear. Academic, 3.75 GPA from Penn, mechanical engineering. That's fantastic. 3.6 is the average of M7, so a little bit above the average from a GPA perspective, from a top school and a challenging program. So definitely strong undergrad. Of those two, GRE 331, leaning towards quant, and a GMAT of 645, which equates to about a 690 in the old GMAT. In my mind, there's no doubt here. The 331 GRE is much, much stronger, and OP should focus on, submitting that score.
Yeah.
Professional. Okay, 4 years of work experience. In contrast to the applicant we were just roasting, that is spot on the averages. If it's 4 years of work experience now, it'll be 5 at matriculation. Perfect. So timing is excellent. I love that. And I'm particularly interested in the real estate angle. I had a client last year with a real estate focus get into Kellogg. So I'm really, I really think that professional experience can work for OP. Little bit of a question mark over the ECs. Look, if OP is a real estate investor and has real estate,
is that really an extracurricular?
Is that really an extracurricular? I would consider that more as a, as entrepreneurial activity, perhaps. I think schools are going to be a little bit wary or wondering, certainly, what do you do outside of work? They don't want people who are just 100% buried in their work. They want people who are, who are broad, who have other experiences. And at the moment, okay, it's a short profile review, so it might be elsewhere, but I'm not seeing that. So I'm a little bit concerned over the ECs. Demographic, white male, 26 years old, they're definitely overrepresented. Not necessarily an issue, but worth bearing in mind. And then the goals, the family business goals. I really like these goals. I think that is going to be I think family business applicants, particularly in the real estate space, we've seen success there. So I love that. I think nothing to change there. I think OP's got a strong profile.
I think the family business is an engineering firm, and then they do the real estate on the side.
Interesting. Okay. So OP, you're going to want to distinguish between those. You're going to want to explain why, if you care so much about real estate, that you're dragging yourself back to the engineering firm. Maybe there's a diversification story. For example, engineering moving in towards construction engineering, that could be an angle. Or maybe the engineering firm makes materials that are used in construction, and you can kind of piece the narrative together that way. Just be careful to make those preferably not sound like two completely distinct activities. I'd like to bring them together. Obviously, there are synergies between engineering and real estate, so that can definitely be done. I think the other thing I'd like to highlight, Mal, is these letters of recommendation.
Yeah.
Family business applicants often have this challenge. Who do you get as a recommender if your boss is your dad or your mom?
Exactly.
It's really difficult. I would typically prefer somebody who you can position as a mentor, right? Somebody who has worked with you on projects, who is maybe slightly separate from the family business. I think will carry a little bit more weight. Particularly the alarm bell here for me, Mal, is client. Like, why would a client of your family business write you a shit recommendation, right? It's just not going to happen. They're not going to jeopardize the relationship with the family business over at LOR. And the schools know this. And so they will see a little bit of a conflict of interest here. So even if you use this client, try and position them as a mentor rather than a client. Try and position them as somebody who's seen you grow, who's worked with you on projects, etc. That'll carry a lot more weight than a client. The one from the real estate partner, I like that, especially if the partner can position him or herself as a mentor. That can work nicely. The other point that I'd like to share, Mal, if I may, is on the goals around real estate.
Yeah.
Okay. We know that obviously people get into MBAs with real estate backgrounds, but the ones that do particularly well, in my experience, are people that have focused on the social impact of their work. In other words, affordable housing, right? Enabling lower cost construction through the engineering business, for example, right? Not the 9% cap rate. All right. If you position yourself as a landlord that's squeezing tenants, forget it. you haven't got a hope. But if you can position yourself as somebody who's developing low-income housing, or at least a proportion of low-income housing, you can come across as having an impact on the world, helping people out, and that's a much more conducive narrative to a successful application. For Kellogg specifically, as I said, I worked with a real estate client last year before last, who got into Kellogg. There's some really nice real estate parts to the program that OP could focus on. Some of the ideas I had. So Kellogg, for example, have a real estate pathway that you'd want to mention. They have a real estate lab that you might want to mention. They have a real estate club. They organize an annual real estate conference. They have a global real estate alumni network that you can lean on for help further down the line. So OP, real estate is good. Use that to your advantage. Do your research to figure out how these schools can get you what you need. And I would say, Mal, that my overall kind of evaluation of this is OP's chances, I would say, are very, very strong for Booth and Kellogg. I would say north of 75% if you play your cards right, and even higher than that if you apply to the part-time MBA programs in those cities. Now, obviously, that depends on where you're based, et cetera, but those part-time MBA programs at those schools, and I worked with a client a couple of years ago to get into the Booth part-time MBA program. If you focus on those, I reckon your chances are even higher than 75%. OP, you're in a great spot. Don't screw it up. Right, next profile.
Right. Yeah. Okay, now this is somebody who wants a reality check, and I think we're going to have to give them one considering their GPA.
Okay.
So they're 28, male, Middle Eastern, but a citizen of Canada. GPA 2.9, and that's just the last 2 years. They aren't mentioning their cumulative GPA because that's even lower. They're also a CFA charter holder, currently doing an accounting diploma, and they're showing a strong performance at that. Not taken any tests yet, so that's something we might have to look at what kind of score they'll need given the GPA. Work experience, 6+ years of experience. Currently financial analyst, promoted in less than a year. Previously a logistics supply chain manager in Canada, previously an intern at Big Four in the Middle East, and they had a few retail jobs right after college. Extracurriculars, now these are interesting. They're a board member at a local nonprofit supporting individuals with disabilities. They also helped organize a charity gala at university to raise funds for refugees. So a lot of social impact extracurriculars there. Post-MBA goals, consulting or corporate strategy. The usual. Target schools. Now these, with Wharton, they said it's a reach. They said it's a big reach. And I think we will be lined on that. LBS, Columbia, Cornell, Yale, Booth, and INSEAD. So yeah, let's get your read on this one.
Ends with how realistic or unrealistic am I being? Okay. Right. Overall, academics. 2.9 is a shit show. It really is. And it might even be lower. Right. How to put this into some perspective. Like, I think it's the bottom 8, the lowest GPA of a M7 school. I think that one of the schools recently we saw, they actually published this data, was something like low 3s. It was like a 3.1 or something. 2.9 is going to be a real issue. It really, really is going to be a problem. And especially if it's even lower than that, that might be a 2.8, 2.6. Now, OP, we'll talk about this at depth, but optional essay is going to be absolutely crucial. The CFA charter holder offsets this a little bit, right? That's going to help, but it's still not, it's still going to be a challenge. Work experience, professional. So quite an interesting mix here of retail, Big Four consulting, logistics, financial analyst. I think one thing that OP has going for him is this range of experience. If you can build a narrative that uses that to your advantage, that could be nice. Extracurriculars, as you highlighted in your run through, I think that board member at a local non-profit supporting individuals with disabilities, that is going to do a lot of lifting. It's going to carry a lot of weight in this application. I would really encourage OP to build essays around that. Any leadership or extracurricular based or difficult decision based essay, use that story, emphasize that, bring that out. There's going to be some really interesting challenges coming from supporting individuals with disabilities that people in other environments haven't faced. That's going to be a strength. Demographic, Middle Eastern Canadian, fairly underrepresented, I think huge, but fairly, so definitely not doing any harm. And then the goals, corporate strategy, and where were they? Corporate strategy and management consulting. Look, I think if you go management consulting, OP, you're going to be throwing yourself in a very competitive bucket that you're not going to really stand out in. I would say corporate strategy, where you draw on your experience across lots of different parts of the business in an industry that you really care about, like one that aligns with your extracurricular activities, for example, that could work. So I would really lean towards the corporate strategy goals, in which case it's strong for the profile. And I would just emphasize that the optional essay is going to be absolutely crucial. That 2.9 GPA is going to need explaining. Now, what could be a reasonable explanation, right? Health issues, family issues. Don't say I partied too hard. That's not what they want to hear. Try and, if possible, mitigate that with some really valid reasoning, and then it might get discounted to some extent, but it's going to be tough, certainly for those top schools.
So OP wants to know whether they should take the GRE or the GMAT. They're still sort of deliberating on which test is better to take for them, and what would position them as a stronger applicant given their GPA.
Yeah, good question. I recently interviewed my colleague Mario, our colleague Mario, and I asked him this exact question. And long and the short of it, his advice is, because the GRE has a longer track record, because tutors have more material and experience with the GRE, generally we're seeing better outcomes from applicants who are taking the GRE. We'll link to that, Mal, in the comments, that full interview. But I think broadly, my GMAT GRE tutor colleagues would say lean towards the GRE. Probably gonna yield better results for you. And then the other question, I mean, the one that comes up, is this realistic or unrealistic? Look, I really think that 2.9 GPA is going to be a hammer blow for the M7. I just cannot see a Columbia, a Wharton, a Booth allowing somebody with a 2.9 into the cohort. You'd have to have something absolutely exceptional for that to get by. These work experiences in particular, I'm not seeing that exceptional angle. I think if there was something that really stood out, I would like to think that OP would share it in their evaluation. What do I mean by exceptional? Like, startup founders that have raised multiple millions could get by with a lower GPA, a GPA below 3. There are some military applicants that have won exceptional awards that could possibly get by with a lower GPA. There are Olympians who retire from sport and decide to go and do an MBA. They could get by with a lower GPA. But I'm not seeing any of those things here. So I think M7 really you can forget about. I think
in the previous roast, I think John mentioned if all of these schools, Booth might be the most open to lower GPAs. And I did a little bit of Googling, and 2.36 is the lower end of their current class profile.
Okay.
Right now. So that might be one of the...
That might be doable. Might be Booth of the M7s. It's the one that maybe has a chance. But you just know that person with a 2.37 has done something phenomenal. And I'm not seeing that on the professional side. So I would say, if you're going to be realistic, OP, you're going to need that GRE to come in well offsetting, well above the average of these schools. So high 320s at a bare minimum. And then you're going to be wanting to target T20, T15 area as your bread and butter. Maybe throw a Booth application in there, as Mal says. But I would say T15, T20 is really where OP should be aiming.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Next profile. Let's go.
Next is somebody who wants you to gauge their competitiveness for T15 and T25 schools. So they think that admissions metrics are a bit of a black box, so they're not sure. They want some clarity.
Why we're here?
Yeah, that's why we're here. 27 male, they're Asian, half white, US citizen, grew up in Tokyo. So I'm assuming it's half Japanese. 3.4 GPA, international relations, they did from Colgate, GMAT from the old version 730, Q48, B42. They have 3 years of experience, but it's in sales and market research role, spread across London and NYC. Currently, they're in EdTech. They're working as a product manager since Jan 25, so only a few months into this role now. No real extracurriculars. They have a D1 soccer career as an undergrad, which is the highest echelon of soccer playing in the US, but nothing after undergrad. Post MBA goals, the usual suspect is consulting, T1 or T2. And yeah, they want any thoughts about their profile. What do you think?
Hey, academic, 3.4 GPA, not great. 3.6 average for the M7s. OP is talking about T25, T15, so it might be passable there, but certainly not the strongest GPA or even strongest part of this profile. 730 is solid. For context, that's bang in line with the old M7, the average of the M7s from back in the day when they were using this version of the GMAT. So that's okay. That's solid. 3, from a professional perspective, 3 years of work experience. I assume that's now, which means it's going to be 4 years at matriculation, which is bang on the average. So that's great. Timing is spot on. The sales and market research role, I'm not seeing, I mean, it's very short, not that much detail here, but that's not necessarily going to be a particularly impressive role, I don't think. I'm not imagining any management experience, for example. There's no mention of any promotions, for example. So I'm a little bit wary on that front. In terms of the extracurriculars, you've alluded to this. This is a stale extracurricular. Any extracurricular, and this applies to everybody across all industries, across all demographics, everything. If the last extracurricular you had was during undergrad and you haven't done anything since then, you are shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to MBA applications. So I would encourage OP to take something up pronto, even if that means delaying application to round 2 or even next year. Applying with 0 extracurricular is not going to be conducive to a strong application. It's going to be very difficult to write your extracurricular essays and your contribution essays without any extracurriculars at all. Sure, you can write about your undergrad as a soccer player, but I think something more recent like coaching soccer would be way more impactful. So that's on the EC side. Demographic, actually a little bit of a hidden gem here. The half white, half Asian aspect, not really a factor. Fine, overrepresented a bit, but not a big deal. But this US citizen growing up in Tokyo, that is going to provide some interesting stories, I think. At the very least, you've got a really good background essay, which is like the short sort of, typically 250 whatever characters that schools ask about your background. But I would actually encourage you to explore that for the contribution essays. If you don't have any extracurriculars going for you, then really your contribution to the school is going to be hinge on this international experience, right? Whether that's, I'm imagining maybe OP could tell the story of moving to Tokyo and like having a culture shock as a US citizen. And during my MBA, I'm going to help other people integrate when they experience culture shock doing the reverse, moving to the US. Maybe there's a mentorship responsibility. Maybe there's a club leadership role where you could do that in. So that I think is going to do a lot of lifting. And I think that is a strength in OP's profile. Last point of my evaluation is goals. Consulting. I'm very skeptical, as you know, Mal, about people saying consulting. Why? You're up against all the consultants, right? It's the biggest group of applicants. A lot of them have already got guaranteed offers to return to MBB. You do not want to be you don't want to be competing with these people. The consultants have the highest GMAT averages. They have the most breadth of experience. They've got some really juicy brands on their resumes. You don't want to be fighting that fight. And so I would encourage, I like this product manager and edtech angle. I would encourage OP to focus on edtech, focus on PM. There are lots of people applying to MBA programs to pivot into a product manager and edtech role, and you're already there. Why would you throw yourself into the consulting bucket? I'm not seeing it. I would say, OP, one piece of advice I've got for you would be to rethink those consulting goals. Of course, once you're on the MBA, you can recruit for consulting all you like. But from an application perspective, I don't think it's going to put you in the strongest light. So I would say, I would encourage you to think about edtech, other edtech roles, for example, a business management type role, a corporate development type role within edtech. That might play to your strengths a bit better. Maybe a PM role at a company that aligns more with your values. Soccer related, for example, that might align, that might be a better goal. But just generic T1, T2 consulting, not going to work. Okay. And then the conclusion, I think, to the only question I'm seeing really is this question over round 1 and T15. So I would say round 1 is on the cards, but I would say consider delaying to round 2 if it's going to make your profile stronger from an extracurricular perspective. And I think that this range is the right range to be aiming for. And not seeing M7 material here, although, you know, throw with a good consultant, with having your back and a decent narrative focused around the international experience. M7 is not out of the picture, but I do think that this T25, T15 range is for you. And I think if you play your cards right, you could secure an admit, maybe even with a little scholarship around that bottom end of the range, certainly on the cards.
Okay.
Awesome.
I think that's we've covered our profiles for the day. Shall we move on to a bonus question?
Good idea. Good idea.
Now, our bonus is, okay, so is an MBA worth it if I'm making bank right now in an industry that I want to stay in after my MBA? So should I even get it if I'm earning well enough? So the OP has been researching MBA programs. They like Foster. And because it has good ties to tech companies in their areas, and he's currently in tech, they're currently in tech, both them and their partner. They're interested in product management longer term. But what they're worried about is that salaries for graduates from Foster, they're about 151K average after post MBA, but they'd be in a lot of debt with the MBA, about 200K in debt. They think they could pay off those loans quickly, but is it even worth the money to go to an MBA program, or just try to work their way laterally and get that raise? What do you think?
Good question. There's one thing I want to clear up first, which is a misconception that is quite common, and I want to just tidy it up. The first is just because graduates of a given school have an average of, you know, an average income of whatever that number is that they publish, it's not like employers are saying, you graduated for the same role. They're, you know, let's say they're recruiting a product manager. They're not going to say, you graduated from Wharton, so we're going to give you 300K. You graduated from Foster, so we're going to give you 100K for the same role. That's not why these numbers are different, really, between schools. There's a little bit of that, but it's not the main reason. The main reason is that some schools skew towards industries that pay better. If, for example, INSEAD put 40% of their class into MBB, which is really well paid, then of course their average is going to be higher. Wharton put a massive proportion of people into finance in the US, which is well paid. So it's actually, this number is really a function of what proportion of the class go into what industry. Don't use it to think that if you're working in an underpaid industry, that all of a sudden that same underpaid industry is going to pay you way more because of your MBA. You're still going to be underpaid compared to the bankers. So that's one thing that I want to just tidy up a little bit. The next point is around timing, which has to be a factor here. Tech recruitment right now sucks in the US, worldwide, but in the US as well. And so we're seeing it's actually a really good time to be doing an MBA. If you apply now, September 25, you'll be start matriculating in 26, you'll be graduating in 28. The job market's going to look completely different in 2028. It might be worse, but it's not going to be the same. That's for sure. There's a strong likelihood it's going to be better. So in terms of timing, there is a big, there's an argument to be made that an MBA right now, if you're ever going to do one, it's a good time to do it. If it was me, my kind of conclusion here, Mal, is I'd be doing both in tandem. All right. I'd be applying to MBA programs, Foster, for example, and I'd be applying to jobs, and let's see how the dust settles, see where it lands. If you get the offer, maybe with a substantial scholarship from Foster, which, based on the what we've seen of this profile, I haven't got that much information, but it looks like a solid profile. There might be a strong scholarship emerge from Foster, reduces that debt number dramatically, go that route. Alternatively, you might get dinged by Foster. We don't know what the GPA is, for example. You might get dinged by Foster and get a job offer in a company or a role that aligns with what you're looking for. Go that route. I would say this is a perfect case of hedge your bets. Lots of irons in the fire, as my grandma would say. Put a few different irons in the fire and let's see where OP lands. That would be my advice.
Yeah, OP saying that even if they don't go for the MBA, they have to switch companies anyway. So they are just considering the MBA as an alternative to switching these companies. And it may open more doors for them.
So apply to jobs, apply to MBA programs, see what ends up happening. That's a really solid approach.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all our profiles for today's roast.
Fantastic. Mel, thank you so much for grilling me today as we grill the roasts. Anybody watching, if you enjoyed today's session, remember to like and subscribe. And also, if you would like your profile to be roasted, feel free to get in touch directly via Reddit, and we will, if you've given us enough information, we will include your profile in our future roasts. And I think that's everything. Mal, thank you so much again. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. See ya.
All right. See ya.